A few months ago, Serenity was at Yosemite, the Cocoa conference, which I was supposed to be at and then was too busy to be at, which I feel terrible about. She was there and she texted me and she's like, "You have to ask this person to speak at Layers." And I listened to absolutely everything Serenity says, and so I was like, okay. I emailed him like 1 minute later, and he probably thinks that I'm like a huge weirdo because I was like, Serenity Caldwell told me that I must ask you to speak. So he is here today. He is a writer, a musician, an iOS developer. He does like a bajillion things, so I don't even really know how to introduce him other than he is incredible and accomplished. So I'm really excited to introduce TJ Usiyan.
All right, thank you. And thank you for organizing this. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Serenity, for suggesting me. So I'm going to start right now by saying that the opinions that I present are my own, but they are my opinions. And I do believe that I am right because I am me. I am going to basically complain at you for about 17 and a half minutes. This format usually works in a more intimate setting. We'll see. You won't get to argue back. That'll be refreshing. Here we go. Krista Mergen with the civil comments actually leads up to this really well. I'm going to talk about saying things and thinking about things that you say. And there are a lot of ways that I will complain about this. I want you to be prepared. This is going to be a multifaceted complaint fest. There's a person on the internet, Argumatronic, who honestly you should all, please, actually, all of you today, please follow this person. She's having a rough go of it right now. But she posted in regards to a little bit of controversy on the internet that I'm going to gloss over, a statement: there are two meanings of respect. And I'm not going to completely read all of this out, but I will quote parts of it. One is to treat someone like a human. The other is to treat someone like an authority figure, right? And I think that a lot of the breakdown in conversing or interfacing with other people has to do with the fact that we mix the two up, right? Respecting someone who you don't know, who you have no reason to respect other than the fact that they are human, is just respecting the fact that they're human and just being like, there are nice things that I should do and reasonable things that I should do, and there are probably a lot of things that I should not do to this person, even though I have no idea whether or not I like them as an individual. And then there's the respect that teachers or parents or sort of this top-down, like, I have structural power over you or over your situation, and you need to acknowledge that through your actions and words. So we're gonna move right along. I was at a conference, and I'm not going to be specific about which conference here in the setting because we're being recorded, and I'd like to be a little bit nice. But there was a joke. There was a joke towards the end. So in the beginning of this conference, there was a sort of mini conference on with the goal of increasing the diversity in this conference's community. And when I arrived, I was the only black person. And honestly, it was a programming-related thing, and I program, and I am accustomed to it. I even grew up in a school where, brown folk, 1% of the student body. So, like, I'm accustomed to it. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm fine with it. And I had some interesting conversations with one of the organizers who, was also black, and he was like, I was so glad when you walked in because we didn't manage to give any scholarships out, and that was just kind of how it shook out. And I was really, really depressed, and then you walked in, and that helped a little bit. So I was like, okay, cool. But at the end of this conference, there was a moment, I don't think it was a keynote, but it was close to the end, and it was definitely, yeah, I think it was a keynote. There was a joke about how, this specific type of programming was like judo. And I was like, okay. And they had a couple points about like, taking force and redirecting it and that sort of stuff, and I was all right. And then the last beat was, and it's mostly middle-aged white men who have a bunch of money, or something like that, or just middle-aged white men. And everyone chuckled, and then we moved on. Ha 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 ha. And that's great, that's wonderful, except like I got to look around the room and be reminded like, yeah, none of you folks look like me. Yeah. And that's a little reductive, right? There were, of course, brown folk, but at the end of the day, most of the room did not look like me, and I got a nice little reminder, and everyone chuckled, and then that was it, right? Because that's what you do after you acknowledge it. You tell the edgy joke, and then you just don't really do anything about it, or talk about how that is actually a problem that you would like to solve. Okay, all right. Recently, there was a mathematician on a flight who the flight was turned around because he was doing math, essentially. The lady next to him tried to do a little small talk, and he wasn't having it because he was busy doing something. And then she called the flight attendant over and was like, oh, these hard to read inscrutable figures are on the screen, and and he's not really trying to talk and blah, blah, blah. And they turned the plane around to ask him questions. I don't even blame the person on the ground who actually asked him questions, because honestly, when someone calls you and tells you, hey, we turned a plane around, you're going to have to ask this person some questions and make sure that they're not a terrorist, what do you do? The plane has already been turned around. You can't tell them, please don't do that. Please, look at the screen. All right, so that's frustrating. And the point of all of this is people don't think about the implications of what they say. And that's exactly what civil is about. And it's easy to just point this out and we can all agree, yeah, people don't think. But really, think about what, telling that joke and then moving on says. It says, I noticed this thing. I think it's kind of funny. Maybe it's funny because it makes me feel awkward that it's this way. And that's all I have to do about that. That's it. I don't really have to try to interrogate why this is. I don't have to interrogate how I can actually change this. In pointing it out, I have done everything that is required of me. And you can say that that's unfair, and in some ways, maybe that's unfair, because maybe that wasn't the point of his talk. But honestly, bringing it up and then moving on, way worse than not bringing it up. I can lie to myself and be like, they don't notice that everyone looks like them. They do. But, I can lie to myself, right? They don't notice. Right? And we can also say, well, it's just part of a bigger problem, right? Society has these issues. How am I going to fix everything? And that's, I'm not going to curse, tomfoolery, nonsense, wrong. All right? BS. Yeah, there you go. Because to say, all right, well, I have to solve everything if I'm going to solve anything, then nothing will ever get solved. Nothing, ever. Because there will always be problems when you have hundreds, millions, thousands, whatever. When you have two people trying to do things together, you're always going to have problems because you're two different people interfacing and communicating, right? Sometimes I'll say something and I'll think you understood and you won't have understood. Sometimes I'll say something and you'll think you've understood. And language. So we should all give up and just be silent. Okay, doing all right on time. Got more complaints. Another thing that I'd like to complain about is outreach. Going back to that the conference in the beginning, one of the big problems is if your outreach efforts depend on the people who are underrepresented in your community actually reaching out to you, you're in a bad place. Because if I'm looking at a community that doesn't have people who look like me or who I can relate to, I'm going to ask why. Like, I might not explicitly ask that, but I'm going to have a feeling when I look and say, okay, well, most of those folks aren't like me. Like, is it because people have tried to enter the community and then have been pushed out? Is it because they, like what happened? Why? Why? And some of those fears or doubts or concerns might be unfounded, but they're going to be there because it's all about pattern matching. It's all about looking at some situation and for your own safety, especially as a minority or a woman or any of these underrepresented people, you have to interrogate why aren't there more of me there? Right? Like, is there something that I should fear? Is there something that I should be worried about? Right? So outreach, you should probably try to be much more proactive than you think you ought to be in the beginning. Right? Don't assume that people are going to just reach out to you, and don't assume that you will actually get a very wide spread of people coming to reach, to do outreach. You need to take it upon yourself, and that's unfortunate sometimes. It's a little bit difficult, but this idea of fractal, the problem being a fractal one probably should have been a slide earlier. But the idea is that, again, if you're talking about having to solve everything, well, what is society except a bunch of smaller communities, right? Like, and if you say, well, I can't fix this because societal pressures mean that I can't fix it, well, how do societal pressures actually get formed? You have smaller communities, you have gatherings like this, you have conversations with 1 to 2 people, you have family members who have conversations, and you put pressure on them to change their views, their beliefs, their practices, and that's how it actually happens. Right? Yes, there is a wonderful amount of top-down pressure, but right now, I would not like to think about what we are considering for our top-level pressures and representatives, because no, don't speak the name. So I also would like to complain about this word, diversity, because we can say, oh, I care about diversity, and then that's sort of a shield, right? Like I care about diversity. Like we're doing our best to create diversity, and we foster diversity. And usually with this word, you have some numbers, and then we're done, right? And again, I'm being reductive partially in the interest of time. I'm doing pretty well on time. But just diversity doesn't get at the what I think is the most basic component of the problem, typically, which is just that we're just not considerate, and not in a mushy, considerate like, oh, you brought an extra straw for me, but you don't consider this other person as a person. Like, you did not approach, someone, perhaps because you literally didn't consider them. They're not part of your experience. They're not part of your existence. So you just literally did not consider them as a person. And maybe that's it, but that's the problem. Not that we just don't have enough of those other people. That's what we consider a fix, right? Diversity by numbers is a fix for the fact that you don't consider other people who you don't see, and the fix is to see them. But maybe even before we actually see them in our everyday existence, we can consider them still. Lots of conferences have problems with this idea of a code of conduct. I think that the heart of a good code of conduct is not really trying to solve every possible problem before it ever happens. It's positioning the conference in a way that they can actually try to address when something goes wrong. No one expects you to catch every single problem, right? Like, no one expects a Spanish Inquisition. There are going to be things that you did not planned for, that you didn't say, well, you can't bring a raccoon and then throw it at someone's face. Okay, it's not exactly offensive so much as it's a health code violation. It's you can't do that thing, right? But the idea is, well, you put something in your code of conduct that says, well, look, we didn't exactly write what you did in there, but this gets to the heart of it. Maybe we have to add a no raccoon clause or something. But like, if you don't have a code of conduct, you have nothing to point at. You have nothing to say, we were going to hold you accountable for your behavior. If you have no code of conduct, you say, well, we took your money, and you got to be here and do whatever you wanted. The end. Right? So, good. I got through most of my complaints. I had to cut some of them out. But, so all of this was a bunch of, complaints about just being kind in a simpler way than we tend to frame it, right? Usually when people say, oh, be kind to others, do unto others, all of this, we make it sound as though what we want is for you to be, to like really, really foster other people's daily experiences, and that would be great. I'm not speaking against that. I'm saying that we are not even hitting that mark, and honestly, I don't even expect everyone to hit that mark. You're going to have a bad day where you don't want to help someone get up. But knocking them back down or commenting about how they fell or, like going out of your way and sort of, being mean is what I'm like, well, bad day or not, that's just bad form, right? So think about the things that you say, because the answer to this question is, well, always. You are always on stage. The stage changes, the audience changes, the context changes, but you're always on stage. Let's do this. Well, 2 minutes, let's skip some things, right? Stereotypes and assumptions, it's very easy, simple to slide into this idea and accept stereotypes about yourself and about others. We usually talk about accepting stereotypes about others and how that's bad and that leads to bad interactions and all sorts of biases, but we make stereotypes about nerds and geeks and computer programmers and developers and designers and women and men, and sometimes we accept those and we, in an attempt to shore up our confidence and say, it is okay that I am a black man who likes hip hop, or a woman who likes dresses, or a woman who really likes pink. Like, it is okay, and we step into that, right? But unfortunately, because language is imprecise and context is fluid, right? We end up with these things where sometimes we make it sound like, well, if you want to be a nerd, you need to be socially inept. Or if you want to consider yourself a nerd, you need to lack these skills or have these skills or like these things. And it's difficult, right? It's a challenge to embrace, but also acknowledge that there can be difference. So I'm not saying that doing this is universally bad or universally good. I'm saying that thought is really the thing that is absent, right? Think about what you say and think about what you have said. When someone approaches you and says, you offended me with that comment, right? Honestly, the lowest response, right? Like, and not like lowest like bad, but like the bare minimum of effort is to say, okay, and leave it at that. Don't try to convince them that they are not offended, because what? Like, right? Don't try to convince them that you did not intend to offend them, right? Honestly, most of the time, if I say something like, that was offensive, I can assume that you did not necessarily mean to offend me. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But you did offend me. That happened. If you think about it and you're like, look, I have this added bit of context, and I crack that joke and it means something, blah, blah, that's cool, that's fine, it's fine. But fundamentally, don't try to convince someone that they are not offended, right? think about what you say before you say it, but you can't do that all the time, so think about it again after you said it. It's that simple. Like, if someone tells you that there was a problem or an issue, like, give that person and that thing that you said the time and energy and actual focus that it requires. And sometimes you think that the context that you're in is lighter or more jovial or more joking than someone else. And it's a special kind of infuriating and disrespectful to say, like, well, I was just joking, as the full defense. Because it was still a bad joke, right? And, I'm not, again, I'm complaining. These are all things that I believe that you should do because I'm me and I'm right in my head, and that's fine, right? But at the end of the day, I think that everything that I've said so far has been somewhat reasonable, right? If you pull nothing else from this complaint fest, it's sort of this slide, right? Think about what you say, think about what you have said, and just remember, you are always on stage. If there are other people, even yourself, things that you say to yourself, things that you say around your children. Oh, I love how they will sometimes just really make it clear what you said before. Yeah. Where did you learn to, me, right? You're always on stage. Children are great examples of that. Thank you for listening to me complain for all of that time. And I believe we are going to be at lunch. My name is TJ, and that's all.
Thank you so much. That was great. That was so good.